So we're gonna do some books that I find creepy. I'm not really a horror person for books. I haven't yet read Stephen King. I mean, give me a couple more days of this quarantine and we'll be getting there. So we're just gonna do some books that I have found freaky. We're gonna start with like least scary and then work our way up to the scariest. Some of these you've probably heard of, some of the authors you've heard of. Some of them you might not have. They're good. Most of these are more adult, so just as an FYI, none of these books are going to be rated G. I do have one that is R for sure and should only be read by adults. The rest of them probably you could read to junior high and high school. Least scary at number 5 by one of my favorite authors. This is the Andromeda strain. Michael Crichton wrote Jurassic Park. He wrote Terminal Man. Both are quality. I highly recommend all of those. This one is one of my favorites and quite honestly a good one for this time period. It's about a microbe that comes from space and kills people instantly. So they isolate it and they're studying it. The way they go about it is quite exciting. It gets really interesting. There's a lot of medical terminology. There's a lot of like how they deal with these things, how they go about dealing with a microbe they've never seen, what they're going to do to contain it, what they're going to do to solve the problem of it killing everyone. Probably my number one Michael Crichton book, which is hard to do because he has some really, really good ones. Like I said, not horribly scary, but kind of keeps you on your toes. Number 4, a book almost everyone has heard about. This is Dracula. This is not the first vampire novel, but the first famous vampire novel. And it's great. It's not horribly scary for us, but it can be kind of unexpected. Dracula's weird. They've mentioned before that the first couple chapters of this book are actually hilarious because we know that Count Dracula is a vampire, but the main character Jonathan doesn't. Jonathan being in deep denial about Dracula being a vampire is unintentionally funny. If you like Dracula, if you've read it, you should check out the annotated version of Dracula because they make a case for one of the team members being on Dracula's side throughout the entire book. Again, not too terribly scary because it's so old, but it's a good one nonetheless. It's told in letter format, so it's like journals and one person is reportedly recording all of his thoughts into a gramophone. This is the second Agatha Christie book I've ever read. Agatha Christie is a very, 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 very popular mystery writer. This one's the scariest, I think. It is about 10 people trapped on an island and they just start getting murdered, one by one by one, all in line with a nursery rhyme. So the nursery rhyme has a couple different names depending on how politically correct you want to be. It's really scary. After I read it the first time, I would sleep upstairs because I found it so horrifying. I have read it since then. There is a couple different versions of it on movie. There's one version of movie that is no longer protected under copyright infringement. I highly recommend watching it and then editing it to your heart's content because it's a really horribly done movie. There is a new version out though, put out by BBC, which is available on Amazon, and that one's really good. Number 2, this book is rated R. I'm letting you know right off the bat. This is Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane, or Lehane. I don't know which one it is. This is a scary book. It is a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. Dennis Lehane's book is really well written. He's an incredible author. I've only read one other book by him because that book was also horrifyingly scary. This is Shutter Island. It is about a man who is on an insane asylum and he has to hunt down a patient. At least that's what it's supposed to be about. But then it starts to shift and change and you learn more, and just the more you get into the book, the deeper and deeper it goes. It's really interesting to see what all happens. It's kind of a horrifying book, but it's gonna stick with you. You're gonna think about it. It's scary. I really enjoy it. It's really well written. Like I said, rated R. I don't make that rating lightly. I have picked an author, really, for my number 1 spot on Scariest. You grew up in a Christian home, you might have heard of Frank Peretti. Frank Peretti wrote some pretty creepy books. This one is actually not one that I've ever made it all the way through. This is the second in a series. The first book in this series is called The Hangman's Curse, and that book is the most horrifyingly scary book I've ever read in my life. First off, one of the major parts of it is spiders, so there you go already. If you don't like spiders, I highly recommend not reading that book. That's my number one scariest book. This is not that one. This is the second in the series. Still pretty freaky, not as much. Frank Peretti also wrote another book series called The Cooper Kids, also Christian. All of these books are Christian. Still rated probably PG-13, because they're horrifying. Jay and Lila are the two main characters in these ones. Jay and Lila go through some horrifying adventures. This one is horrifying because there's a moment where everything changes. You weren't expecting it, quite honestly. I wasn't expecting it. It's jarring. It's creepy. It's really good. Very, very interesting. This one is my favorite, though, of all of them in the Cooper Kids series. This is The Deadly Curse of Toco. It takes place in Central America, and oh, it's horrifying. This is the 6th and 7th of the series. You don't have to read them in order. These are my number one for scariest books to read.